Atmospheric phenomenon. There's three camps when it comes to atmospheric phenomenon. There's those that believe these things are real. There's the camp that believes these things are fake, and then there's still those that believe people are seeing things. But what are these? Are they friend? Are they foe? Or fantasy? Throughout time, flying objects, aliens have intrigued the minds of men. People from all parts of the world have noticed strange phenomena and described stuff in their own language. Hindu Indians have described them as floating chariots. Objects seen have been documented in Tibetan books. Roman historians have recorded incidents over Rome in the 3rd and 4th century. There are many chronicles of incidents occurring before the birth of Christ. They've been described as fiery shields, phantom objects, all sorts of descriptions. Egyptians noted back in 1600 BC, circle of fire in the sky, fire as bright as the sun. And it's been noted by some that have claimed to see aliens or their aircraft that they have a terrible stench. When these vehicles have landed, the earth is scorched along with a terrible odor. These events were so notable that it influenced Egyptians to chronicle these events. There's a monastery in southern Yugoslavia that has some interesting medieval murals. Inside this monastery are old paintings, medieval murals that date back to the 14th century. Eastern Orthodox art in general has a very strong visual language, and it has some intriguing paintings. Well, located at Viskovsky Dekani Monastery in Kosovo, Serbia, this mural of the crucifixion of Christ dates back to 1350. Do you see anything unusual in this mural? This mural has some interesting figures in the upper left and right hand corners that seem to be flying objects with rays of light streaming from them. What are these objects in the corner? Some argue these two objects are the sun and the moon. Others believe it's proof that the artist was trying to capture an alien visitation. Looking closer at these objects, they kind of look like some sort of vehicle. Sort of looks like a man in a vehicle, sort of looking back. What's he looking at? Appears a man is following him with some, uh, seemingly his hand on some steering device. These drawings, whatever they may be, seem to have aerodynamic form with rays or jets coming from the rear. No explanation for the origin or purpose is known. Val Camonica, Italy. Val Camonica is famous for its carvings and painting. There are rock drawings, petroglyphs, in Val Camonica that date back 1,000 years BC. There are a few carvings that stand out. One sort of looks like bulky gods in overalls with helmets seemingly carrying antennae. No explanation can be given for these ancient petroglyphs. Istanbul, Turkey. In the Palace of Topkapi, there's a curious set of maps kept that were found in the Orient by Turkish Admiral Piri Reis. They were found in the 18th century, and although discovered in the 18th century, these maps date back to 1st century AD and most likely copies of earlier maps. One of the maps shows a region that is still largely unexplored, the Antarctic. The continent of Antarcticus was only established in the 19th century AD. These maps could have only been created by someone who was a great distance from the Earth. Cairo, Egypt. 12 miles from Cairo is Giza, the site where the giant pyramids are located. Pyramid Cheops. Pyramid Cheops was constructed 2750 BC, about 4,600 years ago. The area of the base of Pyramid Shops is 570,000 square feet. This is huge. A small town of about 500 dwellings could be erected in that space. At its completion, the pyramid was 481 feet high. The total weight of this pyramid is estimated to be 6.5 million tons, which is the equivalent of 30,000 freight train engines. It took over 2.3 million stone blocks to build this pyramid, with each stone weighing a crushing 2.5 tons. Yes, these stones were transported from a quarry in the Mokattam Mountains at a time men had neither cranes or trucks to transport such items. The thought was they used rolling rollers, but in those days, as today, only date palms grow in the region, which is a soft wood. How could any workman haul these colossal blocks and erect them up a height to over 400 feet? It's said that it took 27 years to build this pyramid. Well, back of the napkin math, 27 years to move 2.3 million blocks would be like erecting 233 2.5 ton blocks a day. That's that's 10 blocks an hour, every hour, 24 hours a day. I'm not even sure that's humanly possible. Consider this unusual fact about Cheops. If you multiply the height of the pyramid by 1 billion, it equates almost exactly the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Mere coincidence? The longitude that runs through center of Cheops divides continents and oceans into two equal halves. Is this mere coincidence? Rudolf van Keulen. Some of you may remember him at the end of the 16th century. This Dutch mathematician, Van Keulen, arrived at the figure pi, which one can determine the circumference of a circle. If you divide the base of the pyramid Cheops by twice the height, you get the figure pi, which Rudolf only found 4,000 years later. It's difficult to brush off the mathematical probabilities of this pyramid construction as mere coincidence. Something else to consider about these pyramids that I find interesting. Deep down in these pyramids are intricate murals on the ceilings and walls, yet there's no evidence of soot or other carbon byproducts that would have been left behind by candles or oil lanterns. So how were these murals actually drawn without light? Lebanon. There's a large stone in Lebanon called the Stone of the South, the largest stone ever cut and carried by man, 65 feet long, 15 feet high, 12 feet wide. It's estimated this stone weighs at least 2,000 tons, which that would be over 1,000 huge or large cars by today's standard. 2,000 tons. This stone was cut in Beirut and moved to its location, which would be an hour and a half drive by car. This rock and similar were used for foundations or monuments or terraces. The question is, how were they moved from quarries hundreds of miles away? Easter Island. Everyone's heard of Easter Island. Small island, very small island, only 15 miles in length, 7 miles wide. It's a small speck in the ocean. And on this island are 1,000 gigantic stone figures. These statues are made from very hard stone, very hard to cut. Many are 65 feet high and estimated to weigh 400 tons. And that's just what's exposed. We really don't know the true size without excavation. And these gigantic stone figures, they're human looking. They all have the same expression. Question is how were these giant figures moved there? The legend of Easter Island has it that they moved themselves with the help from Mana, a mysterious force. Legend has it that only two priests could invoke this mysterious force, and mysteriously one day the priest disappeared along with the mana. Egypt, the Colossi of Memnon. Colossi of Memnon, these are two massive stone statues of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, which stand in front of the ruined mortuary named after him. The colossi are 60 feet high and weigh an estimated 720 tons each. These statues have stood since 1350 BC. These statues are made from block quartzite, sandstone, quarried near modern-day Cairo, and transported over 720 miles overland to Thebes. But it's unknown how these blocks could have been transported. There are too large. They're too big, too large to transport upstream on the Nile. So how were they moved? No one knows. Japan. It's an area in Japan that has rock drawings in rock that no one can explain. This drawing appears to be a tiny golden replica of what looks like an ancient flying machine painted out of rock. This was painted over 7,000 years ago. No one can explain this. Southern Peru. These carvings in the ground cut at least 2,000 years ago, and these drawings can really only be seen from a great height. They can't be recognized from the ground. And there's lots of lines. They don't make sense unless you're high above. Some of these lines start and end nowhere. What was their purpose? No one seems to know. The above picture seemingly looks like a spider, and the other one kind of looks like a hummingbird. Then you have one that makes no sense at all, almost looks like an airfield or something. Lines that start and end. What's the purpose of these drawings? A picture of an overlay of many of the drawings that are cut in the ground there. I find it kind of interesting that one carving looks very similar to what a spaceman would look like. No explanation for these lines, figures, what they could be for or what their purpose is. Yet these things were cut over 2,000 years ago. These are just a few oddities of ancient past that seem to defy explanation. Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. Let's look at what's been going on in the last 75 years. Let's start with the 1940s. Back in the late 40s, strange objects in the air started to be noticed. They were known as flying saucers or cigars. Cigars because some sightings described oblong objects upwards of 100 yards in length. These sightings were seen from all over the world: Russia, Brazil, France. And at the time, there wasn't much shared by the government, perhaps because of the 1938 CBS radio broadcast by Orson Welles that caused so much panic with listeners believing a Martian invasion had taken place. Maybe that's why the government was so quiet. The first, the first post-World War II sighting occurred June 24th, 1947, when a private pilot claimed he saw a string of 9 shiny objects flying past Mount Rainier at speeds in excess of 1,200 miles per hour. After that, there went on to be other similar sightings in the following week. Why did all of a sudden these sightings begin in the mid-40s? I find it interesting that these sightings began in the late 40s. This is about the time that we started to experiment with fusion, an atomic weapon. Could it be that when we began experimenting with atomic energy, it garnished the attention of aliens? Maybe they wanted to come down and see what we were doing, what we were working on. After all, atomic energy and its potential has far-reaching implications. Think of this. The sun is a star that releases energy by nuclear fusion of hydrogen nuclei into helium. It's a stretch, but it's the same process God allowed to cause the universe to come into fruition. I'm just saying that fusion and fission in my mind, this is an incredible discovery, and I'm amazed that man discovered these properties so quickly. All these sightings of these strange flying objects were not just seen in America. These sightings also caught the attention of the USSR, causing panic. Russian researcher Felix Ziegel was a co-founder of the Russian UFO research group. He became an overnight sensation when in 1967, speaking on Soviet television, provided an extensive report on UFO sightings. In his report, he said that UFOs have been seen all over the USSR, craft from every possible shape, small, large, flattened, spherical, with the ability to remain stationary in the atmosphere or shoot along at over 65,000 miles per hour. He says that they move without producing the slightest sound by creating around themselves a pneumatic vacuum that protects them from burning up in our stratosphere. The craft has a mysterious capacity to vanish and reappear at will. Besides, they are able to affect our power resources, putting to halt our electricity generating plants, our radio stations, our engines, without, however, leaving any permanent damage. So refined a technology can only be the fruit of an intelligence that is indeed far superior to ours. This report from Felix was the first report that the West, America, was aware that the Soviets were aware of UFO phenomenon. Back in 1952, the Air Force scrambled. The Air Force was scrambled because UFOs were buzzing the White House. They were identified on a radar screen, 5 in a fleet. These UFOs were being chased by the Air Force when all of a sudden the UFOs accelerated away at over 7,000 miles an hour. Radar screens could see both the UFOs and the jets tracking them. The UFOs would disappear and the jets and pilots would be called back to the base. And as soon as they got back to the base, sirens went back on and the chaos, uh, the chase was back on. This cat and mouse game, uh, this lasted for over 6 hours. And the F-94 pilots chasing these objects provided credible eyewitness to these events. However, these sightings were later explained away by the Air Force as temperature inversion. Really? Like an Air Force pilot doesn't know the difference between a temperature inversion and an aircraft? So let's talk about these pilots and the F-94 Starjets that they flew for a moment. What I find interesting is that the F-94 Starfire jet was a state-of-the-art interceptor built by Lockheed. This is a fighter jet with an afterburner that's extremely fast. The F-94 was quite a plane in its time. But what I find more interesting is a little over 10 years later, Lockheed came out with the SR-71. The SR-71 is a highly classified aircraft, and even today, there's not a jet that can fly faster or higher than the SR-71. So in a little over 10 years' time, the technological advancement, stealth, and materials used were still and still are state of the art. In my mind, how is that possible? How is it possible? But even with the state of the art and all its engineering marvels, the SR-71 isn't a match for the nimbleness of a UFO. The SR-71 can't turn on a dime. Pilots say that their encounters with UFOs are something they can't describe. An SR-71 to make a right turn, it would take up half the state of Ohio to do it. Because going as fast as they do, that's how much area is covered for them to do a right turn. Yet, these pilots, they are seeing things that can turn 90 degrees instantly. That simply doesn't match our universe, the physics of our universe. How can something speeding that quickly turn on a dime? Doesn't make sense. But I'm still fascinated with the advancement from the F-94 to the SR-71. I'm fascinated. I find it intriguing that in 10 years' time, we've had such a leap in technological advancement to go from the F-94 to SR-71. The SR-71, we're talking stealth technology. We're talking about material that is still top secret. So, whose engineering is this? Where's the genius behind this? Where did this technology come from? Where did the technology and the engineering come from behind the aircraft, behind the building of the pyramid? I find that intriguing. In the late 40s and 50s, when UFOs became more prevalent, we saw some incredible technological advancements. Computer systems, the EDSHC, which is the Electronic Delay Storage Automatic Calculator, was developed and built. This machine paved the way for modern computing. Right after that, tube technology, which was used for this machine, was replaced by the transistor. This was a this itself was a huge step when Bell Labs developed the transistor, essentially compacting the size of a mainframe computer to something that could fit in the palm of your hand. Other advancements of the 50s included transistors, which we just mentioned. By the way, uh, currently an IC, which can fit on the pinhead or the tip of a pencil, contains 134 billion transistors. Huge. But other advancements include fiber optics, microchips, solar batteries, satellites, just to name a few. All above are huge technology leaps that came from the 50s. So let's fast forward a little bit. 2006. What happened in 2006? There was an incredible sighting over O'Hare International Airport where 12 United Airline employees and others witnessed unusual phenomena in the air happening around 4 p.m. in the afternoon. It could never be explained. What was this? What were they seeing? The following year, January of 2007, a retired Air Force pilot photographed a rash of bright, colorful lights hovering over the skies of Arkansas. A retired colonel who spent 32 years flying F-16 went on record to say, "I'm certain it wasn't an aircraft from Earth." Colonel Field also ruled out the possibility of flares, saying they didn't descend like flares typically do. He said, "It's not anything that I've ever had any experience with. They were some kind of energy or something." What does this all mean? I'm not saying that all this stuff that we just reviewed is factual. I'm sure that some of it can be explained away, but not all of it. I always said where there's smoke, there's fire somewhere. And there's always a thread of truth which cannot be ignored. There simply has to be something going on that defies human logic. It can't all be fictional. Well, let's fast forward to this year, 2023. Why this year has there been so much talk about unusual flying phenomena and aliens? Maybe it's due to the recent Chinese spy balloon saga that occurred earlier in the year. We all remember that, the drama that unfolded when the balloon was shot down over South Carolina. Whatever the driver is, increase of sightings are on the rise. While many of these sightings may be ruled out as imaginary or other, there's always a thread of reason and truth surrounding these events that cannot be ruled out. There's lots of organizations and professors looking at the phenomena in the skies. There are serious, in-depth studies being taken place on this area of phenomena. People have tried to explain it away. For years, the U.S. government largely ignored reports of mysterious flying objects seen moving through restricted military airspace. The Air Force has claimed it away. They've said this aerial phenomena, they've said it's artificial satellites or temperature inversions or even high altitude balloons. The Air Force have claimed the sightings to be caused by light refractions or mirages, shooting stars, ball lightning, marsh gas, or or the all too familiar hallucination. But now, the U.S. government is slowly beginning to acknowledge that UFOs, which the Pentagon refers to as unidentified aerial phenomena, they're real. They're real. The question is not what they are, but rather who they are. The government knows what they are. They're some form of extremely sophisticated aircraft not made by any government on this planet. The capacities of these aircraft are utterly astounding. They can travel at speeds in excess of 50,000 miles an hour in our atmosphere, speeds that would burn up anything of Earth made material. These vehicles can make right and left angles, turns at will. They can go up or down and accelerate from a couple hundred miles an hour to thousands of miles per hour in seconds. These aircraft defy all known laws of gravity. We don't know the explanation, but the government knows that these aircraft exist. But whatever is out there must have theological implications for the church. We can't ignore the possibility that we are dealing with something extraterrestrial or ultra dimensional. The world of late seems to have recognized something is out there, and the church needs to take an objective position on this reality. I don't see how the Christian church can ignore it. Let's let's face it. If there is life on other worlds, we would have to reevaluate the whole New Testament. So what does this all mean from a biblical perspective? The Bible tells us that God is the creator of all things, and there's nowhere you can go and not find Him. God is God of time and space. There's nothing to fear regarding His power because He created all things. But when it comes to these aerial phenomena, these things are explained in so many different ways and forms. They've been described as cigar shaped, saucer shaped. Some are long, some are round, some have lots of lights, different lights. People that have claimed to see beings, alien beings, claim that they describe them in all sorts of descriptions. Beings with crater-shaped heads, some tall, some short, some with long necks, even some looking like asparagus-like beings. But one thing in common, people everywhere saw something, either coming out, going in. Large vessels, size of 3 to 4 feet, up to several hundred yards. Different colors, vessels that change colors. All of this simply cannot be dismissed. It can't be dismissed. How can this be explained? I believe there are only 7 possible explanations. First explanation, they're a hoax. They're a hoax. Nothing ever happened. This was all conjured up to mislead people. Well, this can be ruled out since scientists, astronomers, and pilots have seen the same phenomena. Second possibility is natural phenomena. Natural phenomena. That what we're dealing with here is plasma, balloons, or birds, or even lightning. But this can explain sightings by pilots and people who know what flies through the skies. They are a reality. We can't get away from that. Third possibility is interplanetary. Somewhere in the solar system, we are being visited by people from other planets. But this is refuted by the fact that giant telescopes of the skies have failed to see anything traveling interplanetary. So these vehicles are not interplanetary in our solar system. Fourth explanation could be intergalactic. Intergalactic, meaning these vessels are from another solar system. These are people visiting us from another solar system somewhere out there. If that was the case, we would follow the same process, taking soil samples, investigating people. So intergalactic from outer space to here is a possible option. But again, this can be refuted by the fact that giant telescopes of the skies, Hubble telescope, have failed to see anything traveling interplanetary. Another explanation could be civilization on our planet. Is it possible that I mean, it's possible. There's some places that we've never investigated on our own planet. It's a theory. However, there's no evidence for that. Some UFOs are seen going into water. However, there's no evidence that's been seen to support that. There's no evidence under the crust or around the continent. So best evidence is this cannot be true. Another fact I find interesting for those that have seen these vessels entering the water at extremely fast speeds is that they make no wake. There's no splash when they hit the water. I find that interesting. Sixth possibility or explanation. Some secret weapon by the US or Russia that no one's talking about. Could it be these things are some secret weapon? Many believe so. If that was the case, someone had something in 1952 traveling at 7,000 miles an hour. That was amazing. If that was the case, we would have both been to the moon and other planets. It's no secret weapon. It's no secret weapon. The seventh possibility and the last possibility that I can think of is ultra dimensional beings. Ultra dimensional beings. That we are dealing with ultra dimensional beings. And this is what I believe we're dealing with. What is this? What does this mean? What is ultra dimensional being? And this is where I'm going to pick up in our next study. Something else to consider before I leave you here is if is this these things, these beings, if they had evil intent, they could have wiped us out long ago, but they haven't. They have another agenda, and that is what I want to pick up in our next study. The Lord bless you as you continue to follow His Son.